Welcome to Pioneers in Payments, where payments experts share their insights. Now, here's our host, Donna Blum.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Pioneers in Payments. This morning, I have the pleasure of speaking with Delicia Hand from Consumer Reports. Welcome, Delicia. How are you this morning?
I'm fine, thank you.
Well, I'm so glad that you were able to join us here today. Looking forward to just gleaning some insights from you on what's happening with consumers and their demands, trends, opportunities. So let's get started. I just wanted to ask you, first of all, if you would mind sharing with our audience a little bit about yourself, your background in the payments industry or with Consumer Reports and the role that you have there.
Sure. Thank you again for having me today. So my name is Delicia Reynolds Hand, and I am at Consumer Reports as our Director of Financial Fairness. And largely speaking, what that means is we work across different ways to ensure that finances is fair to consumers, meaning that to the extent that consumers want to spend, save, borrow, invest, etc. We both investigate. So we have started to do some more formalized fintech product testing, as well as consumer research. But we also advocate based on the results of those research, and then engage with participants in the broader financial services ecosystem to share that information. And our end goal is we want consumers to have access to the best products. So for consumers who want to pay, shop, spend, save, invest, we want to make sure that they're doing that with products that are safe, but also products that help them make their money go as far as possible in a way that is safe, transparent, and fair. So that's kind of what we mean by financial fairness.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. So I want to start off by talking a little bit about consumer trends. What would you say is the most notable consumer trend that is impacting payments today?
Sure. I mean, I think one trend that we continue to see, and it's why we started our work in this past year really focused on digital payments, is that consumers post-COVID, pre-COVID, use of digital payments was already prevailing, right? There were increasing. And as I believe the audience knows, it's moved from prevalence to now predominance, right? The predominant way in which consumers prefer to pay is digitally. That was definitely impacted by the pandemic, but that trend has continued. And we're now seeing, based on our research, that continuance of consumers are more comfortable and, in fact, now prefer to use cashless forms of payment. So really digital payments. But another interesting trend is they're viewing it not necessarily just as a form of payment, but also kind of a way to really sort of structure and manage their finances, such that their expectations with respect to a digital wallet or a form of payment, digital payment, is much more expansive. So it's moving from being able to access something quickly and conveniently, to make a payment when you need it, to having expectations about what that payment facility is going to do for them. Does it come with loyalty, points or some kind of program? Are there rewards? Are there features or ways to safely sort of make their money go further? So I would say that is something that we see increased interest in.
Great. Well, now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, so most of the people that are going to be watching this video primarily are working for payments organizations, and they're trying to navigate the current payment ecosystem. And obviously, consumer demands, consumer trends is going to play a role in the decisions that they're going to make going forward. So what would you say is the greatest opportunity today for these payments organizations based on what you're seeing in those consumer trends and demands?
Sure. I would say, from our perspective, there's two opportunities. One is consumers are interested in consolidation, right? I think one of the though the increased modes of different forms of payments come with the opportunity of choice and potentially the opportunity to leverage various spaces. It does seem like we're sort of at the tipping point where there's so many different ways to pay and so many different places where consumers could be storing payment information that it potentially creates risk for consumers in terms of, well, where do they have their payment information stored? And, is there a simpler, more streamlined or consolidated way for them to manage their payments? So I would say like that is a space to pay attention to, right? Which is with the abundance of different ways to pay with your phone or, through different kinds of companies that are out there or platforms, right? Social media now largely provides avenues for payments, but also storage of payment information. So how can we work to ensure that with consolidation comes management of risk to the consumer for having their information in multiple places, ensuring that there's also parity in terms of protections for the different forms of payments. In other words, if I decide to pay through a Facebook Marketplace or, using Google Pay or there's so many different options out there.
Mhm.
Do I have the same as a consumer protections as I would if I were using my bank's digital wallet or card? And so really thinking through that perspective for consumers. Should those things be connected and be a more streamlined user experience? And then in offering that, how do we ensure that there's parity in the amount of protection that is available to consumers? And I would say not just protection from a regulatory standpoint, but really in terms of company offerings. So in the same way that consumers may expect continual fraud monitoring from their bank or credit card provider, can they expect the same for other kinds of payment providers, such that if there's sort of irregular spending patterns, can they have the same expectations with respect to notifications?
Also, talking to these payments organizations, what would you say is the biggest challenge for them today to adhere to the consumer demands?
Well, I would say it is that, from I would say interoperability, frankly. And again, going back to that situation from a consumer perspective, potentially their preference to pay isn't really a preference, right? From retailer to retailer, if you sort of step offline, for a minute and just think about a person's daily interactions. What form of payment may they use at the gas station? Maybe they're out in their community and they are shopping at a local store or merchant storefront. While there may be increased, ability on the merchant side, the small business side, to accept forms of payment, the consumer experience of that may be, well, at the gas station, I pay with my credit card. At, my local plumber or other service, men that come out and look at my house, they're asking me for one payment app or the other because it's more convenient. When I go in town, it's another form of payment. So really thinking about the world in which a consumer is living in now. And in some communities, right, then you have other extremes where it really isn't meaningful access to digital payments, but there could be niche instances where that is required, or maybe a transaction or an agreement starts potentially online, but then a consumer needs change and they move back to cash for some reason. So really just sort of thinking about then how do you make that a little bit more streamlined and safe for the consumer as they move in between different spaces, as they move between traditional finance and banking, right? Their checking account and credit into digital wallets and payments. Can there be more sort of seamlessness, I would say, in between those various spaces? And then again, and this is kind of what our recent study was highlighting. When things go wrong, where and how does a consumer get help? Can they get assistance for working through, well, actually, who bears responsibility if I inadvertently respond to a scam and actually authorize a payment because I was misled or didn't have full understanding that I was being induced into fraudulent or other activities, right? Can a consumer expect the same thing? So I'm kind of centering back on some of the same principles, right, but really thinking about institutions considering interoperability from a different perspective, from a consumer-focused perspective, not necessarily, well, can all the financial institutions connect and provide seamlessness, right? But how does that translate in terms of the consumer experience? I think the other thing I would say is one of the things that we are now noticing, so we've moved beyond our look into peer-to-peer payments and have started to build on our initiative and use more methodology, right? And so how there's an opportunity to really sort of think about how the technology cannot just serve quicker, faster, convenient payments, but frankly, how can they serve consumers in terms of a deeper and more meaningful understanding of their risk and benefit, right? In other words, in financial services, there's a lot of requirements for disclosing various things, right? And right now, those mostly take the form of, even in the digital context, right? 3.5 size font disclosures about all the various things. Is this a meaningful engagement with consumers? Do we want consumers to hit what they feel is a brick wall of impenetrable language, or is it to a company's advantage to actually build in some more user-centered design to facilitate actual deeper understanding of their rights and responsibilities with respect to using different forms of payments? And one of the things that we've started to see, which we will be publishing more on, is there are clear good practices out there. There are companies that are taking the next step and gamifying certain aspects of the consumer experience, ensuring that there are pop-ups or specific click-throughs to ensure that the consumer isn't just presented with a ton of fine print and then has to scroll through and quickly say accept, right, and move on. But they have started to move into integration and kind of simplifying certain concepts as a consumer and onboards and starts to sign up for a certain form of payment. So we want to see more of that. We shouldn't be using yesterday's tools, right, which were meant to serve one purpose, i.e. Legal obligations and requirements, to manage these new payment facilities. Consumers deserve not just more convenient ways to pay, but frankly, more user-centered design from companies in communicating their risks and obligations.
So that's great. Now, the most difficult question that I have for you today is to kind of summarize all that you've learned from your research about consumers, and what is one silver bullet piece of advice that you would have for payments organizations?
I would say to really lean into the facility that they've created to make sure that the experience is actually meaningful to consumers. And frankly, that the relationship with consumers is potentially changing, right? So as payments organizations begin to develop new facilities and kind of beyond just payments, they're expanding into a wallet. They're potentially providing rewards or loyalty points. They're building relationship with the consumers. And so their presence and their engagement with the consumers, even if through the app, should change accordingly.
Well, before I let you go, Delicia, I just wanted to make sure that our audience knew how to get a hold of you or learn more about Consumer Reports, maybe access some of your findings. So what information would you like to share?
So we have recently launched our digital finance evaluation initiative, where we will be doing a number of things. We will be doing in digital finance what people know about Consumer Reports traditionally, which is diving deep and evaluating digital finance products of all kinds, and then publishing that in various ways. So we've just launched that. And that can be found on consumerreports.org in our advocacy page for the moment. They'll see there our evaluation framework, which is our product, right, that we now have put out into the world, and we want feedback on it. And they'll also see our first streamlined and limited test of that evaluation, which was focused on peer-to-peer payments. In another month or so, we'll be layering onto that with buy now, pay later. We will then, a few months after, be looking at banking apps, and we'll continue. We'll also be producing data analytics and insights. So after looking at various product markets, what are we learning about better ways to show up for consumers? What is meaningful disclosure in a fintech app? What are some good practices that we've seen that we think may be meaningful to companies? So consumerreports.org, and if you go to our advocacy site, you can look at our work under financial fairness.
Wonderful. And I would imagine that you're also on LinkedIn if somebody wanted to connect with you there.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay.
connecting with folks all the time. I say to folks, we can't do this work without actually working closely with industry. So would love to connect with as many folks as possible to help us evaluate in a way that's meaningful and accurate.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Delicia. I appreciate your time today and all of your insights. This has just been really, I think, very valuable. It's kind of a bit of a different angle. I mean, so often we're talking with people that are in more from the business side of things, and so hearing somebody represent the consumer perspective is so valuable. So thank you so much, and I just also want to thank everybody for watching today. Have a great day. Bye now.